Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to His Excellency Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Chee Hean, Senior Minister and Coordinating Minister for National Security, Professor Chee, Chairman of ISEAS Board of Trustees, and Mr. Choi Shin-kwok, Director and CEO of ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Senior Minister Chee Hean, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the 46th Singapore Lecture. ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute is honored to host this year's Singapore Lecture entitled Kazakhstan and Role of the Middle Powers, Fostering Security, Stability and Sustainable Development, which will be delivered by President Tokayev. I now have the pleasure of inviting the chair for this Singapore Lecture, Senior Minister Chee Hean, to deliver his opening remarks. Senior Minister Teo, sir, please.
Your Excellency, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you. We are honored to have His Excellency President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev of the Republic of Kazakhstan with us this morning for the 46th Singapore Lecture. President Tokayev is on his first state visit to Singapore and is the first Central Asian president to deliver the Singapore Lecture. Kazakhstan is the world's 9th largest country in terms of land area and is the largest economy in Central Asia. It is an emerging middle power with over 20 million people and GDP per capita of about US $11,500. Kazakhstan has a young demographic profile with half of the population below the age of 30. It is rich in natural resources, including oil, natural gas, and various ores. Kazakhstan is strategically located at the heart of Eurasia, connecting China to the east with Europe to the west. 80% of China's overland trade with Europe transits through Kazakhstan. It was no coincidence that when President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative in September 2013, he did so in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. Since then, Kazakhstan has developed the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, or Middle Corridor, to boost its standing as a transit hub. In the past 3 decades, Kazakhstan received 70% of the foreign direct investment inflows to Central Asia, valued at some 431 billion US dollars. Kazakhstan also has a rich history and incredible natural beauty. Kazakh culture combines its nomadic heritage with the Eastern and Western influences that flowed through the Silk Road. I witnessed this firsthand in 2018 when I traveled by train across Central Asia on a 10-day private trip that ended in Almaty, a beautiful city. It was a fascinating journey. Singapore enjoys excellent relations with Kazakhstan, underpinned by warm personal ties between our leaders. Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, visited Kazakhstan in September of 1991, shortly before Kazakhstan's independence. Mr. Lee had been asked to provide his advice on Kazakhstan's development. And since then, there has been a healthy exchange of visits between both sides. I had the pleasure of visiting Kazakhstan officially in 2019, and the President very kindly received me in a call. Last year, we commemorated the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations with then President Halima Yacob's state visit to Kazakhstan, the first by a Singapore head of state to Central Asia. On the economic front, Kazakhstan is Singapore's largest trade partner in Central Asia, with bilateral trade in goods of 600 million Singapore dollars last year. Kazakhstan is also the largest Central Asian investor in Singapore, with foreign direct investment stock of $1.3 billion in 2022. Last year, Singapore and Kazakhstan signed a services and investment agreement under the Eurasian Economic Union Singapore Free Trade Agreement. We have also made progress in enhancing connectivity between both countries, and we welcome Air Astana's plans to launch flights to Singapore in the future. This will promote stronger people-to-people ties through tourism and cultural exchanges. President Tokayev has served as president of Kazakhstan since 2019. He is a good friend of Singapore and knows us well. Prior to his political career, President Tokayev had a distinguished career as a diplomat, which included serving in Singapore during the 1970s and in Beijing during the fateful year of 1989. Not long after Kazakhstan's independence, President Tokayev was appointed Deputy Foreign Minister and later Foreign Minister. President Tokayev subsequently served as Prime Minister from 1999 to 2002 and as Chairman of the Senate twice. At the international level, President Tokayev was Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Director General of the United Nations Office in Geneva, and concurrently, Secretary General of the Conference on Disarmament from 2011 to 2013. He speaks several languages, including Chinese, Russian, and French. Given President Tokayev's extensive experience in diplomacy, I look forward to hearing his views on the complex geopolitical environment and how middle powers like Kazakhstan can navigate these challenges. Before I went to Kazakhstan in 2019, I read President Tokayev's book, which he wrote. And you can see the sections which I marked out which are of particular interest. And it's a fascinating read because of his incredible diplomatic journey. He wrote this when he was foreign minister, and since then he has accumulated much more experience. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, on the surface, Kazakhstan and Singapore could not be more different. Kazakhstan is a huge country, enormous landmass. It's got so much resources, and it's essentially landlocked. Singapore is so small. We have no resources, and we are an island. But in many ways, we do have commonalities. We have to deal, as a small country, always with bigger neighbors in our region. Kazakhstan is so big, but it has even bigger neighbors to deal with. So we understand each other quite instinctively. While Kazakhstan is landlocked, Kazakhstan is on the major land routes in Eurasia. We are an island, and we sit on the maritime routes. So again, we have a lot in common. While Kazakhstan and Singapore are in different regions, there is scope for ASEAN and the 5 Central Asian states to work together in areas of mutual interest. We share a common desire to promote an open and inclusive rules-based global order. And COVID-19 has also demonstrated the need for greater cooperation across regions to tackle serious global challenges, including climate change and future pandemics. So, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure and honor to invite President Tokayev to deliver the 46th Singapore Lecture on Kazakhstan and role of the middle powers fostering security, stability, and sustainable development. President Tokayev.
Your Excellency, Senior Minister Chee Hean, Director Choi Shing Kwok, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Senior Minister Chee Hean, for the kind words about Kazakhstan and myself. I also would like to express my appreciation to the President and the government of Singapore for their warm hospitality and to the esteemed Institute for inviting me to deliver the 46th Singapore lecture. As a Senior Minister Teo mentioned, these days I am paying a state visit in Singapore, the first of its kind since 2003. Singapore is a very special place for me personally. I served here as a young diplomat many decades ago and feel delighted to return here once again to witness firsthand the illustrious success story this proud nation continues to demonstrate. In fact, the remarkable transformation of Singapore under the visionary leadership of Lee Kuan Yew, its founding father, has become a shining example of successful nation-building and economic growth, inspiring countries like Kazakhstan to embark on their own path to progress and prosperity. Indeed, the lessons in resilience and innovation that I learned during my time in Singapore influenced my vision for Kazakhstan's future in this rapidly changing world. Over the last 5 years, we went through a new stage of nation building on the path towards a just Kazakhstan. In many regards, it echoes the Forward Singapore exercise led by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong to refresh Singapore's social compact. Both of them put people first and envisage that the fruits of our progress must be shared fairly, with no one left behind. All-round national transformation is not a simple process, but however difficult, we will not deviate from this strategic path. Last year, we registered economic growth of 5.1% and aim to double GDP to $550 billion by 2029. To achieve this ambitious goal, we have to ensure the annual growth to 6% by building a modern, knowledge-based and innovation-driven economy. We aim to entrench our position as a trusted hub for business, finance, talent, and innovation, very much like Singapore is doing. To double the volume of our economy by 2029, it is necessary to attract at least $150 billion in FDIs. We are dedicated to fostering an investment climate in line with the highest global standards to ensure that Kazakhstan remains the primary FDI destination in Central Asia. We have recently created a high-powered investments board to bolster decision-making and comprehensive end-to-end state support for strategic investment projects. The Astana International Financial Center is a unique institution in Central Asia offering a common law-based international court, arbitration system, and world-class regulation. The Astana International Financial Center has been cooperating with the Monetary Authority of Singapore to develop the win-win partnerships in fintech, green finance, and Islamic banking. Kazakhstan is diversifying its oil and gas-dependent economy by developing non-resource industries such as chemicals, agriculture, and tourism. The current geopolitical situation also highlights the importance of a reliable and diversified global transit and transport infrastructure. Today, 80% of overland transit traffic between Asia and Europe goes through Kazakhstan. The Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, or the Middle Corridor, cuts by half the amount of time required to transport goods via the maritime route. It also efficiently complements the Belt and Road Initiative. We invite Singaporean investors and contractors to follow the PSA International's suit and actively participate in the development of this essential route, including Caspian Sea ports, dry ports, logistical chains, and shipbuilding. We're also working on the international north-south transport corridor connecting India and the Persian Gulf to Russia and Northern Europe. Definitely, a stable Afghanistan could be a game changer in terms of connecting Central Asia to the huge markets of South and Southeast Asia. Kazakhstan also plays a critical role in generating carbon-free power globally as a leading exporter of uranium, accounting for 43% of the world's supply. On top of that, as the world decarbonizes in the coming decades, critical minerals, including rare earths, will become essential. Kazakhstan is ready to become one of the main suppliers of these transition minerals. Obviously, without proper funding, ambitious plans to combat climate change will remain unmet. At COP28 in Dubai, I announced Kazakhstan's joining the Just Energy Transition Partnership, aiming to address the significant coal dependence. Singapore, as a financial center, is doing its part to scale up funding for such transition projects. I see a clear potential for a fruitful bilateral cooperation on carbon projects and transition credits. The digital sector is on top of my administration's agenda, as we intend to become a regional tech hub. The digital economy is expected to produce 150,000 jobs in Kazakhstan, turning into a new growth engine. To enhance our competitiveness, we are pioneering the development of the artificial intelligence technologies. My country is already recognized by the United Nations as a top 30 when it comes to utilizing digital technologies. Today, Singapore is among one of the most digitized cities in the world and ranks third in digital competitiveness globally. Kazakhstan looks forward to promoting the flow of data across the two markets and facilitating investment and research collaborations between our digital economy enterprises. In general, our nations, through geographically distant and distinct in size and historic conditions, share many common values and face similar challenges. There is much we can continue to learn from one another. Ladies and gentlemen, in January 2024, the German Institute for International and Security Affairs placed Kazakhstan for the first time among the world's middle powers. I know quite well that Singaporeans prefer to speak of themselves as a small or even tiny country. But small is beautiful. Tiny is very much strong. However, in my view, Singapore's financial and economic clout, strategic location on the vital international waterways, its 30th spot out of 145 countries in the 2024 Global Firepower review allow our country punch well above its weight. your country punch well above its weight. On top of that, strategic thinking and effective diplomacy have turned Singapore into an indispensable bridge between East and West. With this in view, today I wish to address the role of the so-called emerging middle powers like Kazakhstan and Singapore. Today, the global security landscape is undergoing significant shifts, presenting both tremendous opportunities and considerable risks. From geopolitical tensions to macroeconomic headwinds and ever-frequent climate disasters, we are grappling with crises on multiple fronts. The security architecture is quickly eroding, and the mutual distrust among global powers is deepening. The post-Cold War peace dividend is clearly expiring as the world military spending last year grew to an all-time high of $2.22 trillion, veering towards a new arms race. Despite best efforts, the world is falling prey to a new set of military conflicts. Issues relating to extremism and terrorism, cyber and outer space, artificial intelligence, climate change, large-scale migration, and epidemics further aggravate the global security. However, both Astana and Singapore, as emerging middle powers, cannot simply agree with the polarization and division. Too much is at stake. Left unchecked, we will sleepwalk into a new Cold War. Our two countries aim to foster a condition where competition is managed responsibly and the interests of middle and small nations are respected. In the meantime, the toxic geopolitics is causing tectonic shifts in the global economy. Decoupling of the world economy and bifurcation of technologies could spell disaster. The IMF recently estimated that trade fragmentation could cost the global economy up to 7% of GDP. So, hope is a bad strategy. Without it, few solutions could be found. As we forge ahead as a just Kazakhstan, we are increasingly committed to responsible diplomacy and creating value for the global community. All external partners understand well what Astana stands for and see us as reliable and trusted partners. We will stay open and connected to the world and ensure our relevance as a globalized Kazakhstan, a foreign policy dimension of my country. This is the only way we can thrive in this new era of prolonged uncertainty. As such, we cannot afford to be complacent and passive. Being open to the world, we remain vigilant and proactive in defending ourselves against external challenges. We will never hesitate to defend Kazakhstan's legitimate rights and interests, let alone sacrifice our core interests. Our approach is sometimes viewed with skepticism, criticized for our neutrality. However, neutrality need not be mistaken for a lack of conviction. Instead, it is a deliberate choice to prioritize diplomacy and dialogue over conflict and coercion. This choice is our strength, uniquely positioning us to help bridge deep divides from territorial disputes to ideological conflicts. We are not hesitant to seek resolutions to conflicts where others may have resigned to stalemate. As demonstrated by our recent commitment to facilitate peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia an effort that underscores our belief in the ability of middle powers to drive international dialogue. Earlier in the century, Kazakhstan has supported and contributed to the international process on the Iranian nuclear deal. Since 2017, the so-called Astana process has become central to the peace efforts regarding the Syria conflict, advancing a new vision for conflict management. Last March, Kazakhstan deployed its first independent UN peacekeeping contingent as part of a UN mission to the Golan Heights. In its turn, the hallmark can-do spirit allows the Singaporean diplomacy to make useful contributions on many global issues. Here we commend Singapore for hosting major summits, including a milestone meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and former Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou in 2015, and the historic summit between the United States and North Korea. In the meantime, Astana commends all the efforts and plans proposed by different states and groups of countries in support of a political settlement of the Ukrainian crisis based on the United Nations Charter and universally recognized international law principles. The tragedy of Gaza has proven yet again that a two-state solution for which both Kazakhstan and Singapore consistently advocate is the only way out of this vicious cycle of violence. I am convinced that no good offices as peaceful means of settling disputes cannot substitute an effectively functioning multilateral cooperation system. We must prevent wars, not try ending them. A few decades ago, we welcomed the post-Cold War era with hope and optimism, envisioning a future filled with opportunity and prosperity. Yet today, that vision seems overshadowed by looming threats and a pervasive sense of doom. Multilateral institutions should be updated to rebuild their credibility and reinvigorate multilateralism, starting with long overdue United Nations reform. We will not succeed in tackling these challenges without a comprehensive reform of the Security Council. It is an urgent need of our time that meets the interests of the vast majority of humanity. I am strongly convinced that the voices of middle powers and all developing countries in the Council need to be amplified and clearly heard. Since the Security Council appears unable to move beyond deadlock, it should become more representative so that other countries, including Kazakhstan or perhaps Singapore, could play a greater role in the maintenance of peace and security. There are many catastrophic, even existential threats on the frontier. Climate change, pandemics, increasing food and water insecurity, and the uncertain implications of artificial intelligence are only few of them. By their very nature, complex, cross-border challenges cannot be addressed in isolation. Yet, at a time where unprecedented unity is needed, we are instead confronted with division. As we approach the United Nations Summit of the Future in September 2024, we all need to reflect on multilateralism based on its founding principles, such as consultation, inclusion, and solidarity. As we approach the 50th anniversary of the renowned Helsinki process, history shows us that this process of coming together is not novel. It has historical precedents. Kazakhstan's commitment to multilateralism is unwavering. This year, we preside in 6 international bodies: Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Organization of Turkic States, Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, Collective Security Treaty Organization, Islamic Organization for Food Security, and International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea. It has been an open secret for long that the major gaps in global governance are glaring. We learned from COVID-19 that countries should build bridges, not walls, to navigate shared challenges. Perhaps the most destructive of them is the nuclear threat. Kazakhstan has suffered terribly from nuclear weapons testing, and for this reason, we will continue our struggle for a world free of nuclear arsenals. In March 2025, Kazakhstan will preside at the 3rd meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Kazakhstan will also be hosting a meeting of all nuclear weapon-free zones later this year. The pandemic has painfully illustrated our vulnerability to future biological risks and threats. Political momentum to address this issue favors Kazakhstan's appeal to establish the International Agency for Biological Safety. Both Kazakhstan and Singapore believe their diversity as multi-ethnic and multi-religious societies is their strength. Last September, I published an article in the Jerusalem Post titled "Religious Leaders Can Help Bring About World Peace." A culture of peace can only be based on the principles of unity in diversity and mutual respect. In this regard, the Kazakh-led Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions became a unique platform to fostering dialogue and promoting shared values. We welcome the Singaporean sister initiative of holding the International Conference on Cohesive Societies. In April 2022, I signed the law ratifying the Singapore Convention that establishes a more efficient process for cross-border recognition and enforcement of mediated settlement agreements. There are many other areas Kazakhstan and Singapore can effectively cooperate on. Climate change poses a profound existential threat for all of us. The facts are sobering. March 2024 was the 10th consecutive record-breaking month in both air and ocean surface temperatures. Climate change makes Central Asia one of its hotspots. Even if we successfully limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2050, which looks increasingly unlikely, our region will see up to 2.5 degrees of temperature rise. Kazakhstan's initiative to open the Project Office for Central Asia and climate change on green energy in Almaty can lead on these issues. We also look forward to hosting a regional climate summit in Kazakhstan in 2026 under the United Nations auspices. Water is both the first victim and a driver of the climate crisis. Over 2 billion people in the world do not have access to safely managed water. Here I commend President Tharman Shanmugaratnam for his leadership as co-chair of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. We look forward to his most valuable contribution to the One Water Summit to be held this year at the joint Kazakh-French initiative on the sidelines of the United Nations Conference. The water agenda relates directly to the global food security crisis. According to the latest data, more than 700 million people faced hunger in 2022. Kazakhstan, being one of the world's largest grain producers exports its agricultural products to more than 80 countries. Given global food deficits, we aim to triple the productivity of this sector and to double exports. We see a possible synergy with Singapore's 30 by 30 food security initiative. Distinguished participants, another prominent feature of the middle power mentality of Kazakhstan and Singapore, in my view, is the unique blend of Asian and Eurasian worldview. Both of us historically belong to Asian civilizations, but with pronounced European connotations. 30 years ago, a newly independent Kazakhstan proposed convening the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia. Now the CICA aims to transform into a full-fledged international organization operating in line with the comprehensive security concept. Kazakhstan, with its Eurasian identity, strongly believes that Europe and Asia have a shared stake in each other's security. Since our chair in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 2010, we insisted on establishing a strategic dialogue between the Euro-Atlantic community and Asia. We need a frank dialogue on a new global security paradigm based on the principles of mutual trust and cooperation. For this engagement to come true, Central Asia is indispensable. In our region, a spirit of cooperation has never been higher. At peace with all major powers, and most importantly, with one another, Central Asia stands on the threshold of great opportunity. Young and vibrant population, growing middle class, abundant natural and agricultural resources, transit potential make the strong basics for growth. When a region is economically dynamic, it is also strategically important. Central Asia has our own agency and wishes to reinforce open regionalism, so all external parties have a stake in and contribute to regional stability and sustainable development. The annual consultative Central Asian summits, the Central Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone, and the International Fund for Saving the RLC illustrate the region's capacity for self-led collaboration. And I invite all our partners to look at us and our own merits and not simply through the lens of great power competition. In my view, the notion of the overlapping cycles of friends that Singapore is voicing for a more open and inclusive regional architecture in the ASEAN area is quite relevant for Central Asia as well. It is for this reason that Central Asia took the lead to establish a network of the C5+ minilateral cooperation mechanisms. We intend to work together with all stakeholders to address pressing regional agenda. This is why we consider it important to establish the United Nations Regional Center for SDGs for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. Here, I welcome the joint Kazakh-Singapore Capacity Building Program for government officials of the C5 countries. Given the superb quality of Singapore governance, it is crucial that we equip our fellow Central Asians with relevant skills and knowledge to seize the emerging opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, today the world stands as a pivotal juncture. Where there once was hope, now there lingers fear. And where we once dreamed of progress, we now grapple with the prospect of decline. While a peaceful future requires the commitment and effort of all nations, middle powers like ours hold a particularly critical role. Our agility, independence, and creativity can catalyze meaningful action and restore the spirit of multilateralism. We have the power to take this vision forward, to act with the courage and conviction that the modern times demand. Let us commit to open, constructive engagement with all nations, to fostering partnerships that are rooted in mutual respect and shared goals. Let us advocate tirelessly for solutions that are not only effective, but just and equitable. In the spirit of cooperation and with a firm resolve, let us move forward together, not as disparate nations competing for dominance, but as members of one global community striving for a more peaceful and prosperous future for all. Thank you for your attention and your willingness to engage in this critical dialogue. The road ahead is long and the work is hard, but I am confident that together we can achieve the change and multilateral renewal that our world so desperately needs. Thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much for your very comprehensive address, Mr. President. Mr. President has agreed to take some questions from the floor, and if I may invite questions from the floor, please identify yourself as a courtesy and also the organization which you represent, please. I call on Professor Tommy Koh.
Thank you. I'm Tommy Koh, and I'm an admirer of President Tokayev. Thank you, Mr. President, for promoting Singapore to the rank of a middle power. I admire the skillful way in which Kazakhstan had navigated between your two big neighbors, Russia and China, and between China and Russia on the one side and the West on the other. So my question is, can you share with us the secrets of Kazakhstan's successful diplomacy?
First of all, I would say that Kazakhstan is lucky to have such big powers. Both of them are permanent members of the Security Council, to have as immediate neighbors. We enjoy close strategic partnership with Russia. We share the longest border in the world with Russia, and the trade, despite all shifts on the geopolitical landscape, is developing quite successfully with Russia. But at the same time, our eternal friendship with China is also developing absolutely successful, and I expect with great anticipation the proposed visit of Chairman Xi Jinping, who is supposed to come to Kazakhstan in the very beginning of July to pay a state visit. And the trade is indeed booming between both Kazakhstan and China. And last year it reached $41 billion. And the trade and Kazakhstan has now China as a strategic partner and the largest trade partner in the world. So we are very proud to have both of them as immediate neighbors, and there are no secrets of navigating or being skillful in diplomacy, because we are sincere partners and we want to have eternal friendship. We want to have a stable, friendly relationship with both countries. And personally, I'm very happy to see you, Professor Tommy Koh. I know you very well. We have been friends from long time ago, and hopefully one day I would be able to see you in Kazakhstan.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for a very astute and very modest response, if I may say. Please. Please go ahead. Dr. Ian Story.
Thank you, Minister. I'm surprised you know who I am, actually. That's great. Thank you, Your Excellency, for a wonderful speech. I'd like to ask you about the Russia-Ukraine war and what kind of impact that has had on Kazakhstan and the wider Central Asian region, and what kinds of concerns has the war triggered in your country? Thank you.
It's a difficult case, and from the very beginning, and I have just mentioned in my presentation that Kazakhstan, from the very beginning, was favoring a diplomatic solution of this crisis on the according to the principles or based on the Charter of the United Nations. And as far as Kazakhstan is concerned, with regard to this conflict, we believe that one day it will be over in the long interests of so many countries. Kazakhstan has no direct impact on the conflict in Ukraine, but at the same time, we are concerned about the future of our trade with so many countries. So, as I already mentioned, we have a close relationship in the trade area with Russia. We have traditional feelings of friendship toward the Ukrainian people, and we strongly believe that the negotiations, diplomacy must prevail. And in so many circumstances, I've been voicing the position of Kazakhstan in favor of having negotiations and trying to find diplomatic solutions of this very extremely difficult conflict and dispute.
Good morning, Mr. President. Excellency, thank you for your speech. My name is Julia Lau. I'm from ISEAS. And you mentioned a lot about Singapore-Kazakhstan relations in your speech. I'm curious as to what your key priorities are for suggesting how Central Asia and Southeast Asia could cooperate more. You mentioned some of that in your speech as well, but as President, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, what would be your key priorities for the two regions to talk to each other more and work together more? Thank you.
Speaking about this current situation in Central Asia, I would mention that the feeling and atmosphere of mutual cooperation or even integration is taking over, and unlike it was, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, now all Central Asian countries decided to get together, and we are holding on a regular basis the consultative meetings of leaders of Central Asian states. So the next such meeting is going to take place in Astana, in our capital, in August. So we believe that in this very complex time, when there are geopolitical shifts on the international arena, we must get together. And of course, we are closely following what is happening in Southeast Asia, and Singapore in this respect, of course, plays a very important role and is a country of special interest. That's why I came here to pay a visit, and I held negotiations with all leaders of Singapore. We are very much hopeful that our trade as well as our investment cooperation will be continued. And also, as speaking for Kazakhstan, we are interested in having closer cooperation with other states of Southeast Asia. Just recently, we have been hosting the visit of Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, and presumably next year, I'm supposed also to go to Malaysia to pay a visit. So our diplomacy with regard to Southeast Asia is quite proactive. Speaking once again about Kazakhstan, I would say that our economy in our part of the world is the largest one. But at the same time, we are not complacent. We want to go ahead. We want to carry out liberal economic reforms, and we want to strengthen and to enhance the status of the largest economy in our part of the world. We put priority on heavy industry. We want to diversify our economy, and of course, we want our economy to be more digitalized. In this respect, Kazakhstan is very much respected in the world, but at the same time, once again, we are not complacent. We want to go ahead. Mm-hmm.
We have had questions from the try again. We have had questions from the center. We have had questions from the right wing. Dr. Yaakob Ibrahim, former minister in the government of Singapore.
Thank you very much, Excellency. It was a very, very wonderful and insightful speech. I had the privilege of visiting your lovely country last January. It was snowing, unfortunately not a weather which I look forward to, but the warmth of the people was really something very impressive. So my question to you, Excellency, given that Kazakh is a very young country, Singapore somewhere in the middle, how can we foster people-to-people relationship at that level? I visited the Astana Hub. I was very impressed with the energy there of young people. If you can strengthen that relationship, I think at that level it would be wonderful for both countries. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this matter, Excellency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I support your idea of bringing together the younger generation of both countries. And I believe, and during my talks in Istana yesterday, we have been talking about cultural ties between both Kazakhstan and Singapore. I'm a strong supporter of this kind of cooperation between both states. And as President of Kazakhstan, I'll be putting forward appropriate ideas and suggestions how we could come together, because the future belongs to the younger generation. Whenever I speak and address the young people in Kazakhstan, I always keep saying, okay, we are old, it's time for us to retire, and the power will be handed to you in the nearest future, but you must be ready to run the country. It's a huge responsibility in this complex world. So I think that we will take some practical steps and in terms of bringing together in the cultural sphere both states, and thank you for your suggestion, thank you for your understanding. You visited Astana last January. It was winter. Of course it was snowing, but it was not that surprising, because in Astana from time to time it is snowing even in May.
Well, I think we also understand that Astana Air is looking to fly to Singapore, and we look forward to that. I think that will also open up many more opportunities for people to visit. I think tourism, Mr. President, yes, is a great opportunity. I must tell you, I enjoyed myself in Almaty. You can ski in the mountains even in the late spring, early summer. It's quite fantastic.
Thank you very much, Senior Minister, for prompting me. Yes, tourism. Tourism is extremely important, and we also have been talking about the opening up of direct flights between Kazakhstan and Singapore. I think that in the very nearest future we will succeed to make this project visible.
Yes, please. Ambassador from Indonesia.
Thank you, Excellency President. My question is, how strong confidence, Mr. President, to revive multilateralism, especially to change the Security Council, while the one initiative from Indonesia to set up the fund for new pandemic is very less support from many countries. Thank you, Excellency.
Yes, I've already said about the Security Council of the United Nations, and I think that we must be frank, saying that big powers, first of all, members of the Security Council, unfortunately failed to safeguard peace and security. And currently, the Security Council of the United Nations is in deadlock. That's why I strongly believe that middle powers like Kazakhstan and Singapore, although being a very tiny state, but being a middle power, you have 6 million people, and the GDP of Singapore is almost $500 billion. It's a middle power. Must be more proactive in promoting peace and security and safeguarding peace in appropriate regions like Central Asia or Southeast Asia. So I believe that we must succeed in this endeavor, because otherwise the whole world will come very closely, as I said, sleepwalk to the brink of a Cold War. So I think that it's a huge responsibility, not only for big powers, first of all, for those who are members of the Security Council, but for all of us to protect peace and security in the world. We must not be that modest and shy and even timid, but must be more proactive on the international arena.
We may have time for another question. Yes, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your speech and your time today. My name is Dave from the National University of Singapore. I wanted to ask you about the reforms you spoke of in the United Nations. And do you feel that the veto that the current permanent members that the UN hold, do you think that reform should be taken a look at, and do you think they undermine the other voices in the General Assembly as well as the other members of the UN?
First of all, I believe that the veto right should not be misused quite often. And we must be much more responsible as far as peace and diplomatic solutions of existing conflicts are concerned. Secondly, of course, there should be a broad consensus with regard to a proposed reform of the Security Council. There must be more active consultations between all states concerned. And of course, there should be a rotational principle in the Security Council, okay? According to the Charter of the United Nations, there are 5 permanent members, but other countries, just like Indonesia, for example, the largest state in Southeast Asia, or say, for example, Nigeria or Algeria and so on. They also have the right to get involved in the Security Council, at least on the rotational basis. So it's a matter of consultations. It's about having a broad consensus on this very crucial issue.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for taking the time to answer a very wide range of questions from Kazakhstan's development policy and potential, your desire to have links with our part of the world, and your very active development of east-west links and north-south links, which will bring us closer together. And also sharing your wisdom from many years of diplomacy on how we can build a more secure world and strengthen our multilateral institutions. I think it remains for us to show our appreciation to the President for spending the time with us and for his friendship to Singapore. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Can I check on my book? It was a great book.
Thank you, President Tokayev and Senior Minister Teo, for the insightful discussion. I would now like to invite Professor Chan Heng Chee and Mr. Choi Shing Kwok to present our token of appreciation to President Tokayev for delivering the 46th Singapore Lecture. The pottery piece, handcrafted by one of Singapore's foremost master potters, Mr. Chua Soo Kim, is titled Green Earth. Created in 2006, the piece was inspired by humankind's efforts to combat desertification caused by global warming in deserts and dry zones. It also symbolizes the everlasting hope for a green planet and is part of Mr. Chua's Planet Earth series. I would now like to invite President Tokayev, Senior Minister Teo, Professor Chan and Mr. Choi to pose for a group picture. Thank you, President Tokayev, Senior Minister Teo, Professor Chan and Mr. Choi. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats while President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Senior Minister Teo take their leave. We have now come to the end of the 46th Singapore Lecture. Thank you for attending the event and spending your morning with us. We hope you enjoyed yourselves and we wish you a good day ahead.